What if I told you that your psychological environment is secretly programming your mind against you? Carl Jung discovered that certain environments don't just influence you, they sabotage your mental health from the inside out. In this video, I will reveal what those environments are, how to recognize them, and the psychological protocol to escape. Jung identified 7 psychological environments that slowly destroy the mental strength of most people. These are not physical places, but invisible traps of the mind that you walk into every single day without even realizing it. Many people spend years stuck in these psychological spaces, wondering why they feel trained, anxious, or lost, blaming themselves for what they don't understand. But Jung knew the truth. In 1961, he treated a patient who at first glance looked completely normal, yet beneath the surface, he was slowly unraveling. Jung traced the cause of his decline to 7 specific psychological spaces that the man was unconsciously inhabiting day after day. Once Jung guided him to recognize and escape these traps, his transformation was profound, almost as if he had been given a new mind. What Jung uncovered about these hidden environments has the power to change how you see every relationship, every decision, and even every room you walk into for the rest of your life. The first and most dangerous space Jung identified was what he called the echo chamber. In this mental prison, every voice around you simply reflects your own fears, opinions, and prejudices back at you until they harden into something that feels like absolute truth. Jung's patients spent hours in social groups and political gatherings where everyone mirrored the same worldview, the same anxieties, and the same anger. He believed he was being informed, but Jung saw clearly that his mind was being poisoned. This is what happens to your brain in an echo chamber. Your neural pathways weaken. Research shows that when you are never exposed to challenges or opposing views, your capacity for critical thought begins to atrophy like an unused muscle. Jung described this as a form of collective possession. When group thinking overrides individual judgment, the patient stopped questioning because to question felt like betrayal. The signs of being trapped in an echo chamber are unmistakable. You can predict exactly what everyone around you will say on any topic. Differing opinions feel like threats to your identity rather than interesting challenges. You stop asking yourself the essential question, what if I'm wrong? Conversations become repetitive cycles that only reinforce what you already believe. Jung observed that people who live inside echo chambers don't just stop growing, they begin to shrink. Their minds become smaller, weaker, and more fearful, and they rely on the group's approval to feel safe. But that is only the beginning. Once weakened by the echo chamber, you become vulnerable to the second dangerous environment, the arena of comparison, where your self-worth is measured only in relation to the status and achievements of others. Jung's patient, already fragile, became obsessed with comparing his life to that of his peers. Every story of success he heard felt like a personal defeat. Even his own achievements lost their meaning the moment someone else had done more. Studies confirm what Jung observed, that constant comparison shrinks the prefrontal cortex, the very part of your brain responsible for self-esteem and decision-making. The trap is cruel. Comparison doesn't motivate you to improve. It trains your brain to search for deficiencies everywhere. Jung called this a cycle of inflation and deflation. You either feel superior or inferior, but never truly yourself. The patient explained, "I was promoted at work, but all I could think about was how my college friend became a CEO faster than I did. His victories meant nothing because they were never absolute, only relative." The signs of being trapped in the arena of comparison are clear. The success of others makes you feel like a failure. You reach your goals, but they feel empty because someone else did more. You live not for what brings you meaning, but for what looks impressive to others. Jung realized this space was especially lethal because it disconnects you from your own values and desires. You stop seeking what brings you joy and start chasing only what brings recognition. But the third space is even more insidious. To understand why, we need to look at the science. Modern neuroscience confirms Jung's insights. Toxic psychological environments cause a chronic release of cortisol, which literally shrinks the hippocampus, the region of the brain responsible for memory and emotional regulation. But Jung understood something deeper, something science could not yet prove. These environments don't just harm you temporarily, they reconfigure your default mental state. Spend enough time in them and your brain begins to recreate their patterns even when you're alone. Jung's patient developed what neuroscientists today call learned helplessness. His brain had been conditioned by these environments to expect failure, criticism, and inadequacy. Even in safe places, he could not relax because his neural pathways had been carved by psychological danger. This is why Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." These environments program your unconscious mind to work against you, and most people never realize it because the damage is subtle, gradual, and invisible. The third dangerous place Jung described is the theater of performance, where authenticity is punished and only the correct mask is rewarded. Jung's patient worked in a corporate environment where showing vulnerability was professional suicide. He learned to laugh at jokes he didn't find funny, agree with ideas he didn't believe, and hide every part of himself that didn't fit the company culture. Jung called this the identification with the persona, when the mask you wear becomes the only identity you recognize. The patient admitted, "I don't know who I am anymore. I've been performing for so long that my real self feels like a stranger." This psychological theater is deadly because it trains you to abandon yourself one compromise at a time. Each small betrayal may feel insignificant, but together they erase your essence. Research on self-compassion shows that people stuck in these performance theaters develop severe inner critics, internalizing the harsh judgments of their environment until they carry them everywhere they go. The signs are clear. You feel drained rather than energized after social interactions. You agree with things you don't truly believe. You fear sharing opinions that might be unpopular. You feel as though you are wearing a costume you can never remove. Your true thoughts and feelings begin to seem dangerous or inappropriate. The patient put it simply, "I became so good at being what others wanted that I forgot what I wanted, and when I tried to remember, there was nothing left." Jung realized this environment doesn't just hide your authentic self, it erases it layer by layer, compromise by compromise, until you are left as an empty shell. And because performance theaters teach you to hide who you are, they make you vulnerable to the fourth dangerous environment, the space of silent suffering, where emotional needs are buried beneath the illusion of stability. Jung encountered this again and again in his practice. Patients who grew up in seemingly perfect families, where love was assumed but never expressed, where problems were ignored instead of faced, where appearances mattered more than connection. His patient came from exactly such a family. "We never fought," he told Jung, "but we never really talked either. I learned that having needs was selfish and showing pain was weakness." This environment creates what Jung called emotional starvation. Your emotional needs don't vanish when ignored. They rot in the unconscious, generating anxiety, depression, and a hollow emptiness that cannot be explained. Studies on attachment confirm this. Suppressing emotions in relationships dysregulates your nervous system. Your body remains in chronic stress because your emotional needs are never met. The danger is that this space feels normal. The patient said, "I thought we were close because we never had conflicts. I didn't realize that avoiding conflict also meant avoiding intimacy." The signs of being trapped here are subtle but powerful. You feel lonely even when surrounded by people. You cope with pain instead of healing it. Asking for emotional support feels selfish or weak. You carry intense feelings but have no safe space to express them. The peace in your relationships feels fragile, as if honesty would shatter it. Jung found that people in this space become deeply disconnected from their own inner reality. They know something is wrong but cannot name it, because to name it would break the unspoken rules of their family or community. And then comes the fifth dangerous environment, the storm of chaos, where constant mental stimulation drowns out your inner voice until you can no longer hear yourself think. Jung's patient lived permanently in this state. Newspapers demanding his attention, radio programs feeding his anxiety, endless social gatherings draining his energy, work obligations consuming even his private life. He filled every moment of silence with reading, talking, or activity because stillness felt unbearable.
What he didn't realize was that this wasn't preference, it was avoidance. He feared what the silence might reveal. Unresolved pain, unmade decisions, or hidden parts of himself he didn't want to confront. Research shows that chronic overstimulation damages your ability to form coherent thoughts and clear decisions. The prefrontal cortex becomes overloaded and begins making impulsive choices simply to reduce the mental burden. Carl Jung called this psychic fragmentation. It happens when your attention becomes so scattered that you lose the ability to weave your experiences into wisdom. The patient he observed consumed enormous amounts of information, yet could not truly understand or integrate it. The hidden trap lies in the addictive nature of chaos itself. The brain, adapting to overstimulation, begins to crave even more intense inputs just to feel normal. What once felt overwhelming becomes the new baseline, and silence starts to feel unbearable rather than soothing. Moments of quiet trigger anxiety because the nervous system has forgotten how to regulate itself. You can recognize the storm of chaos when silence immediately drives you to reach for a book, a newspaper, or the radio.
Many people escape into chaos because silence feels unbearable. It brings anxiety, boredom, and the surfacing of unresolved emotions. Yet, Jung knew that wisdom only emerges in the space of contemplation. When silence is endured, it gradually transforms into clarity, into the fertile ground where insight is born. Perhaps the most frightening transformation came in escaping the chamber of self-abandonment. This required making decisions based not on external approval, not on the expectations of society, family, or peers, but on one's own inner truth. It was terrifying because it meant disappointing some people, losing some validation, and even confronting rejection. But it also meant, at last, beginning to live authentically, in alignment with one's deeper essence. The work in the Shadow's basement never truly ends. Each integration makes the individual more whole, more compassionate, and less likely to project inner wounds onto others. Jung noticed that people who escape these traps do not merely feel better, they become different human beings. Their relationships transform, their decision-making grows clearer, and they begin to embody what Jung called psychological sovereignty. Yet Jung also offered a sobering truth. These dangerous spaces never disappear. They will always exist, and they will always remain seductive. The echo chambers will continue to offer the illusion of easy belonging. The arenas of comparison will whisper promises of motivation. The theaters of performance will tempt with approval. Silent suffering will disguise itself as peace. The storms of chaos will distract from deeper wounds. The chamber of self-abandonment will seduce with the avoidance of conflict. And the basement of the shadow will always conceal shame. But none of these spaces hold real freedom. True mental strength is born only from choosing growth over comfort, authenticity over approval, and consciousness over convenience. The essential question, Jung said, is not whether you will encounter these places. You certainly will. The question is whether you will recognize them when you are there, whether you will find the courage to leave, and whether you will create a psychological environment where others too can be free. Jung believed that the future of human consciousness depends on individuals brave enough to choose psychological freedom over the unconscious pull of the collective. That choice begins with something simple but profound, recognizing where you stand right now and deciding where you truly wish to be. Your mind is not your enemy, but the places where you allow it to dwell can easily become your prison or your path to liberation. Which of these 7 dangerous places have you spent too much of your time in? Think about it carefully, because even if the answer feels uncomfortable, acknowledging it is already the beginning of something greater. Often the simple act of naming the place where we have remained stuck becomes the very first step towards psychological freedom. To recognize where we have been is to recognize the invisible chains that have been holding us down. And once those chains are visible, they lose much of their power.
This is why self-awareness is not a luxury but a necessity. Without it, we continue to wander through the same patterns, circling the same mental landscapes, never realizing that liberation is only one act of recognition away. Take a moment to reflect. Was it the place of fear, where every decision felt like a risk too great to take? Where opportunities passed by because doubt whispered louder than courage? Or maybe it was the place of anger, where resentment built walls so high that love and understanding could not find a way in. Some of us have lived too long in the place of comparison, where the worth of our own existence was measured against the lives of others, leaving us blind to our unique light. Others have remained in the place of regret, endlessly replaying scenes from the past as if they could be altered, when in truth they can only be integrated. And then there are those who inhabit the place of apathy, where nothing seems to matter, where passion has been silenced and life feels like a gray repetition. Wherever your answer lies, do not judge yourself harshly. Every human being spends time in these landscapes because they are part of the human condition. What matters is not that you have been there, but that you are willing to recognize it now. That recognition is the crack through which light enters. The moment you admit to yourself, "This is where I have been," you are no longer completely trapped by it. You are already standing with one foot outside. Awareness transforms the prison into a classroom, and every painful moment lived there becomes a lesson that prepares you for growth. So I invite you not only to think privately, but also to share your reflections. When you give words to your experience, you release a part of its weight. When you express your journey, you offer a mirror for someone else who may still be lost in the same place. Your story may become the exact spark they need to see that they too can find their way out. Do not underestimate the healing power of dialogue. It is in conversation, in exchange, and in shared vulnerability that transformation expands beyond the individual and becomes collective. And remember, this is not the end of your exploration. There are always deeper dimensions of the mind and soul waiting to be discovered. Every step of awareness, every small realization opens the door to a wider horizon. The journey inward is endless. But with each step, you reclaim more of your freedom, your clarity, and your truth. So if this reflection has touched you, do not forget to stay connected, because there are countless more insights that can reshape the way you relate to your own mind. Thank you for being here, for daring to look within, and for giving yourself the gift of reflection. Until we meet again, continue walking boldly, continue naming the places where you have been, and continue moving toward the vast untapped possibilities that await you. We will meet again in another moment, in another layer of awareness, perhaps even in another dimension.